Welcome to Sex at 10. I'm Rebecca Rosenblat, certified relationship and sexuality therapist and your host. Here to answer your questions on all things intimate. Whether you're stuck in a relationship dilemma, have issues with your body, trust, trauma, addiction, or orientation, or just need a little help with turning up the heat in your bedroom, give us a shout at 1-800-968-7836 and let's chat. Everything's fair game. If you've thought about it, we can talk about it. Let's begin with a discussion on relationship blueprints. And to help me with that, we're being joined by an expert in the area, Roxanne Derhodge, author of A Therapist's Insider's Guide on Relationships, Healing the Past. Roxanne is a psychotherapist who started her important work in her 20s by working with the Metro Toronto Police assisting victims of crime. From there, she went on to head an addictions unit with the Niagara Health System before entering the corporate consulting world, where she became responsible for over 40 companies. And now with her latest book, her outreach is stretching way beyond all of that. So indeed, we're very fortunate to have her joining us tonight. Welcome and good evening. Thank you so much for coming all the way from St. Catharines to join us tonight.
Well, thank you so much.
Very excited to have you here tonight. Roxanne, since so much of who we are and how we act ties into our attachment styles, could you please begin by telling us a little bit about what they are?
Well, the ideal attachment style is securely attached, and often most people, that's what they're striving for. They're wanting to feel that deep chemistry or connection deep in their tummy. And unfortunately, most of us aren't securely attached, or we strive based on what we saw growing up, or we have templates from TV or maybe friends or things like that.
All sorts of influences.
Oh, absolutely. And then we're trying to replicate it. What happens when I see couples is that unfortunately, maybe one person had parents that were ambivalently attached. They're secure, but then they're insecure in how they relate to the child.
And or back and forth.
Absolutely. Or then there's the element where the child has been traumatized. We're getting close. I want to be intimate, but you are also the one that hurt me. So how do I get truly attached to you? So that dance becomes quite difficult. So when I see couples, I often say, okay, so it's great that you're both here, but we have your parents with us and we have your parents with us, and there's in fact 6 people in this room, and now we're going to try to sift out what it is to get truly connected and what that looks like or should look like based on what you're presenting with today.
And focus on the two of you and leave those scripts and those schemas and all those things that come along into the relationship and indeed into the bedroom.
Absolutely. And I often say that most of us bring some really good things from our upbringings, but unfortunately what happens is the unconscious repetitive patterns that don't get them what they need. So when people get to the point when they can really drop their guard, when people are dating, they're doing everything they need to, they're completely vulnerable, they're there for their partner, and what happens is as time goes along, that complacency sets in. And when that complacency sets in, then they go back sometimes into patterns that maybe aren't going to give them what they're looking for in the relationship.
What they're hoping for, exactly. Viewers, if you'd like to join in our discussion, do call us right away. Now, obviously, these styles develop very early on, as you mentioned, in our primary relationships. So can you please discuss the impact those relationships have on our current relationship?
Well, I think it's quite pivotal in that when I think children come naturally into the world, they are born truly in a blissful state. What happens?
A blank canvas even.
Oh, absolutely, like a clay, and they get molded by a lot of things quite early. Even pre-verbal noticing is something that we know with young children. So they are initially telegraphing around themselves to learn about their environment, and safety and security is the key thing to allow that child to develop really naturally. Psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, biologically, safety is key. And what happens is when they start to get that, the child stays connected internally. However, going back to these sometimes less than ideal scenarios, then the child may learn what I need is maybe not as important, so I'm going to quiet my voice. I'm going to learn to disconnect because that appeases someone else.
Right, and the child can also get the message, I don't matter, my needs don't matter, and they start to get quiet. I'm really glad that you mentioned that it can even happen before they're fully developed verbally, because I've had clients, and I'm sure you have, that will recall something. Will they say, when we lived in a house with a green living room or a green car or something, the parents will say, how could you possibly remember that? You were one when we moved out of that house. So indeed, a lot of that is stored, and people think that at that point the child is just kind of laying there and not soaking everything in. So how do we stop our unconscious repetition compulsion when it's no longer serving us, or worse, it's interfering? Because we've seen, like you said, that the very scripts that we may want to avoid, we're drawn to them.
Absolutely, we repeat those patterns, and people will often say, well, I'm not going to pick someone like my mother, and I'm not going to ensure that this person's not like my father. But chemistry, if it's skewed based on the attachment style, what is chemistry? Chemistry, we think, is attraction, but sometimes it's that unconscious yearning to want a connection to the primary caregiver.
Right.
So I think it's oftentimes trying to talk to individuals about what they experienced. Like, did you feel connected? Were you validated? Were you listened to? Who came to you when you fell? Who came to you when you were bullied at school? How were things dealt with developmentally, beginning as when you were walking around quite early before you could speak? And that really that's where the blueprint comes from, where the individual starts to realize that maybe I thought my needs were being met, but in fact I was stifling certain things, and I'm going to ensure now that I get those needs met. And sometimes they ignore certain things and actually end up in the same kind of pattern from the primary parent that maybe was not available.
Exactly. And it's all about the attunement too, because sometimes I'll have clients, and I'm sure you do as well, that'll come and say, I don't know what's wrong with me. I grew up in a great household. Dad made enough money. Mom was always around. We went on vacations. Nobody fought. And I'm thinking, nobody fought? What did you do with those negative feelings? And those are the households where a lot of times people don't even recognize the dysfunction because they don't know any better. And the repetition compulsion, both of us have done addiction work. How many times has the daughter or son of an alcoholic said, I will never marry an alcoholic, and 9 out of 10 times they end up doing just that. So really important points. Now, you've also written a new book. It talks about relationship blueprints, among other things. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, my book is written on my life, so I'm breaking the rules like most therapists aren't supposed to when we train. So what happened to me is I decided, what do most people talk about? If you kind of go to Starbucks, or you're kind of hanging out in malls, or at pubs, or people generally want to figure out relationships. So a couple years ago, my primary relationship ended after 28 years.
Wow.
And I also, in being in the corporate sector, you're in relationship consistently. So I thought, now that I have this clear time, I'm going to write about my own life. Because I thought, if I have been doing this kind of work and my primary situation ended, maybe I need to explore it and share what wisdom I could gain. And what I did is I analyzed my own life like I was behind a closed therapy door, looking at myself from onset, early birth, all the way up to early adulthood, and looked at the things that developed or the things that I ignored psychologically, emotionally, spiritually in my primary relationship, and went backwards and looked at both of my parents' backgrounds and my grandparents and the things that they brought to me that I chose to ignore, and in turn I did end up replicating certain things.
What an incredible inspiration this must be, because you're right, we're not supposed to disclose, but sometimes disclosure helps people connect. But so many times when their relationships have fallen apart, or they find out that they've been duped, they'll say, I should have seen it, I should have known, and they berate themselves. So what a generous gift for you to give to the world, that you're saying, hey, it can even happen to a therapist, and being able to kind of look in and discuss all of the stuff that you yourself discovered. And I mean, you're truthful with yourself. So it's not like the clients that aren't necessarily truthful with us, partly because they might be embarrassed and partly because they don't know what went on inside them. So for you to do that, that's incredible. And how can our audience grab a copy of your book?
Well, they can go to Amazon and they can get it there, or they can go to my website at roxannederhodge.com and they can order it right off the website.
Awesome. Now, I had a couple of other questions for you as well. You talk about relationship blueprints. So can you tell us a little bit more about what that looks like? Because that's one of the things that you discuss in your book.
What I did is I went through the developmental lifespan and engaged the reader along with telling my story throughout. And I looked at the things that impacted my life, like there was a lot of discord in my family of origin. And I kind of looked at how that impacted how I thought and my view of the world, and in turn my view of relationships. And what I decided was I'm going to make sure I don't replicate. So I actually picked the counter, which was fun. And I didn't look long-term developmentally. I actually ignored certain things that I valued. And I grew up in a very good family, but my parents had a bad marriage. So culturally, there were certain things that I walked away from. And in turn, as I came to my formative years and the stage of having a family, those core values that I really were instrumental in my makeup that I needed in my stage did not exist with the partner that I picked.
And that's really, really interesting because, you know, again, this is something where you think that we would head in a particular direction, but we're hoping to understand what happened. Maybe we are hoping to rewrite a happy ending. And so the pull goes in all sorts of directions. Viewers, if you're struggling with any relationship or intimacy issues and would like to speak to either Roxanne or myself, please do call in right away. Now, what else are viewers likely to find in your book? So you've talked about how your own journey and how you learned that, you know, maybe I wasn't even aware and I didn't pick the right partner. And it sounds like you said the household you grew up in, it was an amazing household, but your parents' marriage wasn't that great. So it kind of resonates that the family you created was amazing, but maybe the marriage wasn't the way you wanted it to be. So it's almost replicating that.
To some degree, and I think I saw the markers, but based on the stage that I was at, I misinterpreted so it could fit. And when I got to a stage where I wanted a family kind of stage, what I realized is that the things that I thought I misinterpreted were in fact quite valid. On this new stage of life, this adulthood. So I think in retrospect, when I walked through things again, I realized, wow, that was actually what I thought it was, but I set it aside.
In the first place, yes.
Absolutely.
Because it was hard to face.
It was hard to face at that point, and the situation that I was at that point really didn't heighten it to cause the discord that I felt eventually. And when the discord started to come up, that's when things started to fall apart, at which point I said, okay, things have to change. And in my slowing, truly, around mindfulness and really thinking about what I valued, forced me to make a decision that was quite difficult for myself and my young son,
Absolutely.
but really became quite pivotal. 6 years later is the best decision I've made.
And you're in a healthy place.
Yes.
So any words of wisdom you want to share with our clients who do find themselves, because I mean, we're drawn to that repetition compulsion. Any words of wisdom with respect to what should they be looking out for? And obviously your book has a lot to offer and they can learn a lot from that. So I encourage the audience to grab a copy. But any words of wisdom in terms of what should they be looking out for? Because we wear blinders to certain things. What are some of those little red flags that we try to ignore?
Well, I think, if you're playing, it's one thing. If it's not long-term, accept it for what it is. But if you're looking for a life mate, that deep internal voice that gives you the messages. I often say our first indicator of really what's true is our emotion. And if your emotion is consistently giving you that message that things are wrong or things have to change, don't ignore it.
Listen to your gut instinct.
Yeah, slow your mind. Think about really what you value and think 5, 10, 15 years out with this person. Is this person somebody that I can see living that life with? And if things are not there at the beginning, can they be shifted?
Right. So that's the key. So kind of having your own plan 2, 5, 10, 15 years down the road and saying, is this something that I can share with my partner? Does it look like, because lots of people say, you know, we're having a lot of fun, but I don't see myself growing old with this person.
Right.
So I'm kind of thinking, so what are you doing? Why are you still with this person? And you should be building the life that you eventually want to grow in and possibly retire in.
Right.
I have a couple more questions for you, so I hope you can stick around. We are running off to break, but I'd love to ask you some more stuff, so please stay with us.
Definitely.
We'll be right back. Keep your calls coming, and let's discuss sex, relationships, romance, or whatever else rocks your boat. And keep it locked on Rogers TV, because we have lots more great stuff still ahead, including your calls. So pick up that phone and call so we can connect.